Good evening. From the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, my name is Kim Irvine. I'm full-time business faculty here and interim director of DEI. I am honored to be part of this Chestnut Hill College event to highlight that diversity, equity, and inclusion is owned by all of us, students, faculty, staff, administration, and our community. Black History Month, which is celebrated each year during February, is a chance for Americans to learn details of our nation's history that unfortunately is far too often neglected and pushed to the wayside. Black history is American history. And President Gerald Ford officially recognized Black History Month in 1976. Tonight, in celebration of Black History Month, the Office of DEI is excited to sponsor this event in partnership with our music department. Sister Kathleen?
Good evening, everyone. In the last minutes when we were getting extra chairs and giving out the programs we had left, what I was going to say got mixed up in some of the programs. So if you have my words of what I was going to see, maybe you could stand up and just say them for everyone. At any rate, it's really delightful to have Dr. Vincent Craig with us this evening. As you may know, he is the professor of music, of piano and keyboard literature at West Chester University, and he has graciously accepted our invitation for him to come and play for you this evening. Dr. Craig made his Carnegie Hall debut in 2017. He also has played at the Kimmel Center. He has played with the University of St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. He has performed throughout different states, including New York, Maryland, Delaware, and beyond. And recently, he has just put together and released a new CD, which is called Radiant Pinnacle. So you can look for that also. Now I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Christopher Doherty.
Thank you, Sister Kathleen, and welcome to so many people who are here from many places. If this is your first time coming to Chestnut Hill College, we're delighted to have you. For our students who are here and for others, it's a real joy to be with you this evening. I'm Chris Doherty, Associate Professor of Business here at the college, and the inspiration for this evening occurred about 18 months ago. Dr. Craig, Vincent, and I are friends and longtime running partners, and so it was an evening after a run that Vincent was sharing his work on Radiant Pinnacle, and I thought what a great opportunity it would be to invite Vincent to come join us at Chestnut Hill College and share his work and his perspectives on the history of all of these wonderful artists that he's been working with over the past couple of years. And so fast forward 18 months later, it's so terrific to see this finally happening this evening, Vincent. It's a joy to be here this evening and celebrate our diversity, to celebrate this wonderful history that you're bringing to us this evening, Vincent, and to celebrate more than anything else your artistry, as those of us who have seen you perform are about to experience another treat this evening as you share your perspectives on the work you perform, and also just to witness your wonderful artistry as you perform it. And so I hope you'll all welcome me in joining Dr. Vincent Craig.
And welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here this evening. It's a really great thrill for any performer to be able to share what we do, because without an audience, there's no concert, right? So you help make this event possible, and this is what we live for. You know, all my life has really been a life of music and the arts, and now as an educator, also trying to pass along what I've learned about music to others through my students, and the opportunity to also, in my concerts, expose people to repertoire that they might not otherwise have heard. So there are probably a lot of names on this program that you don't recognize, and a few that you do, like Scott Joplin. So I'm going to play some things for you, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one of them. And starting with this, this first piece, which is the Adagio in F minor by Chevalier de Saint-Georges. That was only part of his name. His full name, I believe, was something like Joseph Bologna Chevalier de Saint-Georges. And how did he get all that name? Well, he was born in the Caribbean, in Guadeloupe, and his father was a French nobleman. And shortly after he was born, he was taken to France, and it was there that he received his formal musical education, and he became kind of a Renaissance man in the 18th century because he was not only a fine composer, a violinist, actually wrote very little music for the piano, but we have this Adagio, so we play that. But nonetheless, he became one of the finest composers in France at the time. He was also a fencer and an equestrian and a war hero. He led a regiment during the French Revolution, and he has a whole other list of accolades to his credit. But as I said, he was primarily a violinist and a string player. So most of his music that you hear would be written for a string quartet or the orchestra. There are also some other works with piano, such as violin sonatas that he wrote for violin with piano. And as far as we know, this man is the earliest composer of African descent that we know of who wrote what we call Western classical music. So we find it very interesting. This is sort of where it all starts. So this is the Adagio in F minor. I love that they keep bringing in more and more chairs. This is wonderful. You always wonder, will anyone attend this event? Will anyone come to this concert? And you're all here, so thank you. So this next set of pieces is by Florence Price, and her story is as incredible as her music. I wish we had 3 hours. I could tell you, I would spend about an hour telling you about Florence Price's life, and then I would play the rest of the concert. But we don't have that much time, so I won't do that. But read about her. It'll just suffice for now to say that, she was certainly the first African-American woman whose compositions were recognized. And unfortunately, like so many composers of all genders, a lot of her recognition came after her death in 1953. And, she wrote her first symphony and entered it in a competition, the Wanamaker competition, and she won first prize, and one of her students won second prize. A woman by the name of Margaret Bonds, so it was another woman. But anyway, this work, the first symphony, was performed by the Chicago Symphony. And so she was the first African-American woman to have her music performed by a major symphony orchestra. Unfortunately, what should have been an opening of the floodgates for a lot of recognition and a lot of performances by throughout this country of her music, and that never happened for her. But she kept busy and continued writing, composing, teaching. From her humble beginnings in Little Rock, Arkansas, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, even today in Little Rock, Arkansas, the classical music scene is not exactly what it is in Philadelphia or New York. So this amazing story, of course, her family had the means to get her the best musical training that was available locally at the time. Her father was actually a very successful dentist, so much so that he had both African American and Caucasian patients, including a man who was at the time the sitting governor of Arkansas. And they had the means to send her to music school. So the problem was, where could you go at that time? This was probably around 1900. Where could you go as an African American woman to study music at that level? And she ended up at the New England Conservatory. And what happened was, her mother said, "Don't tell them that you're black." I said, "Okay, well, so how does that happen?" So you're going to tell them that you're Mexican. It's a true story. So she said that she was Mexican, and somehow that was okay that she was Mexican. They didn't care about that. So they accepted her, and she went in as a triple major. Can you imagine? She was doing three different areas. She was studying, doing majors in organ and piano and composition all at the same time, and excelling in all three. And I think she also got earned some kind of a teaching certificate at the New England Conservatory. But anyway, she gained the attention through her compositions by a man named Chadwick, who in his own right was a great American composer. And he was running the school. He was an administrator full-time and wasn't really even teaching composition students, but he wanted to work with her himself, so he took her on personally as a composition student and went on from there. So you'll hear two things by Florence Price, because I'm going to play these wonderful character pieces, dances in the cane breaks, and later on, the end of the program, her one and only piano sonata, and the sonata in E minor. I say one and only, but that's for right now. They keep finding more music by her. She was so prolific, and they keep finding boxes and boxes of scores of hers, manuscripts that were unpublished and things that were abandoned. She had a home in the suburbs of Chicago, and after her death, there were literally just piles and stacks of boxes, and they found hundreds and hundreds of works by her, including a piano concerto which was reconstructed from all the parts that they found, and it was premiered right here in Philadelphia just a little while ago, just a year or two ago, by Michelle Can, who teaches at Curtis Institute, and she played with Yannick Nézet-Séguin and the Philadelphia Orchestra. So that's kind of a first. Philadelphia has really a lot to be proud of in terms of their programming. And now you hear Florence Price's music locally on WRTI. You can hear her music almost every day now, and you turn it on WRTI 90.1, and you hear her music every day like you hear Brahms and Schumann and Chopin and all the other classical composers. So these three character pieces, Dances in the Canebrakes, they are largely based on original themes, and they're not based on spirituals or anything like that, but they have folklore elements for sure. And by that I mean you hear rhythms from the Caribbean, from Africa. You hear a lot of that in the music, and you'll hear that in the sonata too. And I'll point out some things later on when I play the sonata that I want you to listen out for. So here's Dances in the Canebrakes by Florence Price. So now I present the 4 seasonal sketches. I have to admit, I'm still learning about Betty Jackson King. I don't know a whole lot about her. And as you can see, she's a little bit more contemporary than Florence Price, and was born in the 20th century. And I've discovered again that a lot of her output is largely written for the voice. She wrote a lot of vocal music. But I really think these seasonal sketches are really lovely pieces, one for each season. And the spring intermezzo, the summer interlude, the autumn dance, and the winter holiday. And what's interesting about these pieces to me is the fact that winter, which is my least favorite season, those of you who know me know I hate cold weather. And I'm always cold, right? You always see me with gloves on as soon as the temperature drops below 60, I've got gloves on, and that sort of thing. And to me, the winter piece has a very different character from the others in that, in terms of its emotional content, the harmonic language is a little bit different. I'll show you what I mean. So in the spring intermezzo, for example, you have this very beautiful arpeggiation in the key of A major. And A major is generally a kind of a bright, sort of happy key, not as happy as C major, but generally a happy. They do. Every key has a character and a certain affect to it. So here's a little bit of the spring intermezzo. So you have this arpeggiation, right? Yay, it's spring and flowers are blooming. Okay, right? And then the heat and the summer humidity comes. Oh boy, I didn't pay my electric bill and the air conditioning's not working. And I'm gonna sweat to death, right? Then autumn comes. So, it's marked ritualistic. So I'll play that one a little slower and a little bit more rhythmically. Then winter holiday. You get the idea, right? Winter is not that I like this piece any less than I like the ones that are about spring or summer, but it's very different, and it's a little bit more. This last piece is a little bit more aggressive, and to some people's ears, it even a little bit dissonant. Not to me, but to a lot of people would find this piece very dissonant. But what do I mean? So what do I mean by dissonant? Well, in music, you have dissonant sounds and you have consonant sounds. So I'll give you an example of each. You play the beginning of a Mozart sonata. You hear that key center, you hear that harmony. Right? If I were to do this, kind of grates on much nicer, isn't it? Right? Then, which do you prefer, this or that? Right, so there's the consonants. There's the dissonance, right? There's the consonants. There's the dissonance. I think you get the idea. So, here are the 4 seasonal sketches. Well, I think we would all agree that Scott Joplin is probably the most familiar name on this program, right? And just to say a little bit about Joplin, you know, he was an incredibly prolific composer, and he was really one of the, not the first to write the piano rag, but certainly, I think, the person who kind of mastered that genre. And there are so many pieces by Joplin that are rags. And what is a rag? Well, a piano rag is, I could describe it as music that kind of imitates a dance band at that time, at the turn of the century, around maybe the first 2 decades of the 20th century, where you have syncopated rhythm, where there are things that are actually happening off the beat instead of on the beat, and also where the left hand is outlaying the harmony and also kind of filling in what would normally be done by a drummer, a bass player, that sort of thing. And one of the things that makes ragtime so difficult to play is that the left hand has absolutely nothing to do with the right hand. They work in complete independence. And one of the mistakes that people make today when they play a lot of Joplin's music is they tend to play his music too fast. And if you look at the markings that he writes in his scores, if you open up a piece of music by Joplin, he's very specific, and sometimes instead of writing the usual musical terminology like adagio, which means slow, or allegro ma non troppo, which means fast but not too fast, he's very specific and very intentional in English, and he writes not too fast. And this is a contrast to Robert Schumann, the 19th century German composer. Now, granted, Schumann actually suffered from schizophrenia and had multiple personalities manifest in his music, but he would write, for example, in the coda of his first piano sonata, he writes in German, as fast as possible, play this as fast as possible. But then you turn the page, and it says faster still. But Joplin doesn't do that. He says, no, you should play these things the way I say. He doesn't put a metronome marking, but he says, slow and not too fast. I love playing Bethina because it's not a rag, it's a waltz. It's a beautiful waltz that he wrote. And it reminds me of some of the music from an opera he wrote. He actually wrote, there is a ragtime opera by Scott Joplin called Treemonisha. And unfortunately, he never was able to raise the funds to actually mount a production of the opera when he was alive. So with what little money he had, he managed to rent out a hall and hire some singers, and they just stood on the stage and with scores in hand, and they sang through the opera, and there was no orchestra, there was no sets, there were no costumes. He didn't have any money for that. And that's all there was for that first performance of Treemonisha. And there was no band or orchestra. Joplin played the score from the piano as best he could. He was actually in failing health. His central nervous system was failing, so he could barely play at that point, but that's what he did. So many decades later, there was sort of a renaissance of the ragtime era. And so in the early 70s, it was many years after Joplin died, he started getting recognized again, and there was a full-scale production of Treemonisha, which was done in New York, and it was sometime in the early 70s, maybe about 1973. And then the movie The Sting came out, which was probably about 1974, and that made ragtime popular. So suddenly people started hearing pieces like The Entertainer and Maple Leaf Rag, and people recognized those. And I'm sure if I played a few bars, I'll turn this off. So if you've ever heard this, right? That's The Entertainer by Scott Joplin. If you've ever heard, and that's Maple Leaf Rag. And you know, some of his lesser known, many of his lesser known rags have, he must have really loved nature, because so many of his pieces have these titles. He names them after trees, and he names them after flowers, and he names them after shrubs. And if you go through, you know, there was the gladiolus rag and the pineapple rag, and what's the other one? Well, the maple leaf rag, obviously, and they go on and on. So anyway, these two pieces are a nice contrast, because you have first Bethina, this beautiful concert waltz, which has several sections, and then the Cascades. Now the Cascades is a piece that he wrote. It was inspired by actually a fountain that he saw at the World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri. And at one point you hear in the music a sort of a surge of water going up, and you know how fountains are, right? When water shoots up through the center like this and then cascades downward, and he does that. Using that kind of arpeggiation. That's called a diminished arpeggio. So anyway, I hope you enjoy these two pieces by Scott Joplin. I need some water. So now comes the commercial. So I do have a couple of CDs out, and I have copies with me. And you know, nobody buys CDs anymore, so I've got hundreds of these things cluttering up my basement. So you'd be doing me a great favor if you take a couple of these home with you. I'm going to have these for sale after the event is over. This first one is the music of Johann Sebastian Bach, and it includes the three-part Inventions, the complete three-part Inventions. The Fourth English Suite is on here, and then 3 chorale preludes, which were actually written originally for the organ by Bach and were transcribed for the piano by Ferruccio Busoni, who was a 19th century composer. And Radiant Pinnacle, and this CD is more recent, and this one features, this is all music of composers of African descent, Samuel Coleridge Taylor, who was British, and Nathaniel Dett, who was born in Canada, and his family immigrated to the United States, and William Grant Still, who is known as the Dean of Afro-American Composers, so he was American. So there's 2 of his suites are on here, the 7 Traceries for piano, and the 3 Visions for piano. So anyway, these are available if you'd like to take a look at one of these afterwards. And we move into the last part of our program this evening. This sonata is just a gem. I call it a gem. I call a lot of things a gem. It's because I like all the music I play. You have to be committed to it. You have to believe in it, whether it's a large piece or a short piece. A sonata doesn't matter, a little character piece. And if you believe in it and you think that it communicates something to your audience, then it's worth performing, you know? And it doesn't matter who the composer is. So this sonata by Florence Price is in 3 movements, and then the 3 sections, or the 3 movements of this piece, are noted by the tempo indication. So the first movement has a sort of an introduction, and andante means it's basically play this at a walking tempo, so it's not fast, right? So Joplin would approve of that. And then allegro, which is the main theme of the piece, of the movement, and then the second movement, which is on andante. And I must tell you, the first time I heard this sonata, I was very impressed with the first movement. But then when I got to the second movement, I immediately thought, I need to order this music today. I must learn this piece. It just grabbed me. And the scherzo is kind of interesting. A scherzo, in musical terms, means a piece that is lighthearted, almost like a joke, but very lighthearted. But what's interesting is that I believe that this scherzo, the third movement, is actually a tarantella. It's actually an Italian tarantella, Sicilian tarantella. And if you know the story of the tarantella, supposedly it comes from Sicily, that if you were bitten by the poisonous tarantula spider, that if you danced the tarantella, it would keep you alive, because otherwise the poisonous venom would kill you. So you had to keep dancing the tarantella. So, you know, you've heard that's the tarantella. So in this piece you hear so no doubt in my mind that she had the tarantella in mind when she wrote this. And that's all I'm going to say. That's all there is to say. So thank you again for being here. You've been a wonderful audience, and I'm glad we had to set up extra chairs, which means that more people showed up than expected, and I see a lot of friends out here, people that I know and people that I don't know. Some of you are probably students here, and this is wonderful. And maybe someday you will have another opportunity to hear someone else play some of this music, and you'll already be familiar with it, or you'll hear other pieces by these composers, and you'll kind of know, kind of be on the lookout for some of this great music that we don't hear. It's just kind of underrepresented, you know? So anyway, thank you so much. All I need now are seatbelts.
What an absolute honor and privilege to have you part of this evening and presenting us with your talents. I mean, honestly, such a blessing for Chestnut Hill College. So we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Also in partnership.
Thank you for bringing me here.
Oh my God, complete blessing. We also want to thank all of you for being part of this night and sharing his amazing gifts with all of us. I'd also like to thank our music department, Sister Kathleen McCluskey, as well as Dr. Chris Doherty. Thank you so much. We know this has been part of planning for quite some time, so this has just been an absolute amazing experience for all of us. So thank you again. Let's give another round of applause. Okay, well, thank you so much, and have a safe evening tonight. Thank you.